What's up guys, this is TubaSteve here, making my second video of Road to Robusto. I'm already in the action. Alrighty, so welcome to the second episode. Sorry for that very abrupt introduction. Here with 8-7, this is, I call the raise pre-flop and then the guy checked the flop, so I think that he's pretty much just giving up. So I'm going to go ahead and c-bet here. Well, not really a c-bet, but you get the idea. I'm going to go ahead and bet when he checks to me. Suited aces here on bottom left-hand side. Pretty much a board where I expect if he had an overpair he would bet. If he has air, he could very, very likely check fold. So I've got another 10NL video coming at you guys because there was some requests for it. Here with King Queen early, I'm just going to go ahead and squeeze, build some image for myself. I expect to get a lot of folds. I think I have the best hand, and I don't really want to flat call out of position in a three-way pot. If I was suited, I think I would call. So today I'm just going to be continuing where I sort of left off with the last video, just basically, grinding it out for another, 45 minutes or so at these stakes, trying to get into as many difficult situations as I can. Here, I'm going to, again, if you remember from my first video, my common sort of game plan is to get in there early, play a lot of pots. So King 7 is not really a great hand, but the guy's been tight-ish so far. Over 10 hands, not very many hands, of course, but I'm going to go ahead and get in there and see what he does early. And I'm going to raise 8-6 here, and since the guy's about 60 BBs instead of full stack, I raised to 40 instead of 45. Definitely the type of hand that you want to be isolating here, though. Now, I should note it's a little bit worse because we got some shorties on my left-hand side here that were still left to act, but and the guy himself was a little short, so perhaps I could have limped there. Some of you guys that are not really quite as strong post-flop yet might want to just fold it with those sort of shorties, because 8-6 suited, you kind of have to be able to barrel in some spots, or pick really good c-betting boards, just because your 8 high really doesn't against a shorter stack, it's not quite as good as a speculative hand, simply because you're not going to get paid off that often, or as much when you hit your hand. So here with 10-9, I might raise if this guy was deeper, but I'm just going to check here and see the flop, given that he's only got 28 BBs. And if this was a heads-up pot, ace-jack-6 board like this, I might consider betting if I had some kind of read on how this guy plays. A lot of these guys will limp and then just fold to bets on boards like this because they have hands like, queen 5 suited. But for now, three-way pot, I'm just going to check fold. So today I'm hoping that I can get into some spots where I can play a little bit more out of position, maybe some spots to consider a bit of light 3-betting. Those kind of things didn't really come up too much in my last video, especially, well, I guess I 3-bet light a fair amount in the last video, but I suspect that for the most part at these stakes, when you're 3-betting light, we need to think about our hand selection as being sort of the most important thing. And so you saw that I squeezed with King Queen over on that other table, on table 4 early. A hand like King Queen, basically, you're going to hear me, if you watch my videos with Beluga Whale, the coaching tree, you'll hear us reiterate this a billion times, is that you really need, especially in a low-stakes passive game, you want hands that are going to do well in regards to, flopping top pair, and then being able to get your money in post-flop with it. So I'm going to start, trying to 3-bet people with hands like King Jack, Ace 10, stuff like that, before I really go too crazy with something like, 5-8 suited or whatever, just because I want to make sure I have a bit of a backup, option in case I do have to see a flop. So here with 7s out of position, there's really no reason to do anything but call here. My plan is probably going to be to check call good boards. This is an interesting board just because there's 2 overcards, so it's not really the greatest spot to continue. It is a dry board, and he c-bets 100% so far, so I could maybe even consider, check raising here. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and do it again early on. Might as well just go for the gusto. He's in middle position, so he should be c-betting this flop with plenty of hands that have to fold. There's no paint card out here, so if he has ace king, king queen, all those hands he's going to have to just fold to my check raise, and so he did fold. So I'll go ahead and make a note on him early on that he folded to a check raise. on a fairly dry board. Here with King Jack, facing a donk better. Donk bets are often weakness, but when he bets pot and he's only got, he bets like almost a quarter, or excuse me, between a third and a quarter of his stack, and I just have a gut shot, I should just definitely fold there. Ooh, 5-7 suited. I might be able to overcall here, but I don't have any reads, and I'm out of position, so I'm just going to fold. Although my relative position would be decent in that spot. 8-10 is a good hand to isolate here on table 3, simply because he's been passive. Everybody, this button player's been tight. Oh, I forgot about this guy. Well, that's really annoying. So basically there's no reason to continue here unless I'm going to go all the way with my hand. There's already $1.45 in there. I would have to put in 35 more, making it $1.80 in the pot with 110 left in the stack. So I simply don't have, well, I'm going to have to come back to this one later. What with the video making, it's hard for me to think about the math. It's possible that once I've raised there, given that he's only got 25 BBs, I could get it in. But actually, no, he's got 25 BBs. I guess he had 20-ish before he stole my he stole, quote unquote, stole my money. But yeah, so that I'll have to go back and look at it when I'm not trying to commentate. But I'm pretty sure that's a fold, actually. And that's sort of the problem is, you can get yourself into a spot where you're committed against a short stack with a pretty bad hand if you're not paying attention to things like that. So I'm going to keep my eye on table 3 to perhaps switch it out because of the shorty situation. But yeah, I guess back to what I was saying a little bit about 3-betting. It's really important that you're not missing some of these spots where people are calling 3-bets really widely. Because if you can get them to call pre-flop, you can take advantage of them in a few ways, especially if we're in position. They're gonna either fold to your 3-bet a lot, which is totally fine. It's very awesome if people are folding to 70, 80% 3-bets. You can 3-bet them pretty much constantly. Of course, down here again, I think it's gonna be pretty rare. And what you are going to encounter instead is actually going to be guys that never fold. And so again, a hand like King Queen against a guy that doesn't fold to a 3-bet with Queen 9 suited, think about how much value you're kind of getting there. Here we just bear ace high, and again, that he's, given that he's a little bit short, I'm just going to check. If I was suited, I would consider raising. If I had a better kicker, I would also consider raising. But here, let's just check and see the flop. I might play a little bit more conservatively today than I did in the last video, just so that I can focus a bit more on commentary. So here with Jack 10, this is a relatively interesting spot. The guy only has a few chips left, so I'm going to actually check it to him, and I'm going to try to induce bluffs. That's not a great card for me, so I pretty much don't expect to really be able to get much value if I bet. The only really good benefit to betting here would be to avoid giving a heart a free card, but there's also a lot of hands that just straight up beat me, like a queen. Maybe a better 10. It's not even that so much, except if I bet here and I get called, I don't really expect to be winning. And now, given that he's so short, I was hoping to get to showdown. The board has come out a little rough, so I'm just going to fold. Pocket 6 is definitely going to see a flop here, especially because we might get some multi-way action. And with ace 10, pretty standard spot to c-bet. I'm just going to bet 55 here. Not too big. A little over 2/3 pot. I have a gut shot here. It's a board where I frankly don't expect him to be calling me that much, but now once he does and I'm out of position, I see no reason to try to barrel or anything. And with a set here, I'm going to... I could bet here. I don't really do this that often. I'm just going to go ahead and bet out. It's heads up, so I think that he's going to raise me very often if he has some kind of good hand. Checking bet, him checking behind is not normally a huge consideration for me. I'm going to shove here, make it look like I have a draw. It's not like a huge consideration for me, but... Okay, so he folds. Raise donk on 8-6-4. 2-10, fold, 2-3-bet, shove. So I suspect he might have just been raising me because I donk bet there, and, donk bets are often weak. But and so a lot of people think that, let me bring that hand back up here again. And I'll come right back to it in a second once we play these out. So Queen 3, of course, just air fold. And so he check called me on a king high two-tone board. I'm actually going to bet smallish again. I think he can call with medium pairs. I think he can call with a lot of draws. Sure, he has a king some of the time, But I think that, this guy being that he's very loose and he limp called, he can have a ton of draws. The three's not a good card to barrel, but I was kind of just trying to get some thin value. He could have called me with ace high. We'll see what happens at the showdown, see if my read was good. Oh wow, so he didn't fold fives for two barrels, so um, definitely the kind of guy we're going to get lots and lots and lots of value against. Doesn't fold 5-5 on king, 2-3, two-tone, 3, 2 barrel. So, he had pretty much the type of hand I expected him to have. The great thing about that is he doesn't have to fold a hand like that too often, because I think he does, looser player, probably has a decent amount of air, a decent amount of worse flush draws, and I have 6 outs when he calls me again with that type of hand, so, and now I have a read on him too, that he plays very, very loose in these spots, and so I can, now, normally if I had queens, say, on that flop, I might check to get a little pot control, but against this guy, I'm just going to bet 3 streets. And what I might do is bet relatively small on each of those 3 streets, especially the later streets, when the bets start to get bigger, but definitely want to be trying to look for these kind of guys. The guys that don't fold to barrels are the guys that you should be getting very, very, very thin value from. And so, the ace-10 there, obviously, like I've already said, is very, very loose, but again, I think that early on in the session I would like to sort of figure out what this guy's up to. And if he will fold to a 2-barrel on a board like that, again, that's a read that I have for later on. So with ace-10 offsuit facing an under the gun raise and a call, this caller looks like he's pretty bad so far, but I'm doing so poorly against the under the gun player. Given the fact that since it's going to be a multi-way pot, my only real option to win the pot is to flop something big. Ace-10 off is really just almost never going to flop a huge enough hand. Oh wow, and so this guy's calling raises pre-flop with king-6, so he's definitely the fish at the table. And again, paying attention to these hands that were not involved. Oh, well, he's gone, so I guess it's irrelevant. But paying attention to these hands where, we're sort of not involved, but we can still, see what's happening, will definitely give us some extra EV through reads. Ooh. I'm gonna check back this flop against this player. He or she just sat down. No reads. A board where I expect a shorty to play back a lot, just because I think that they're gonna have hands that connect with this board very often. He checks again, so I'm somewhat tempted to bet at this point. But given the board texture, still I think there's plenty of hands that he could check that he's not just check folding, such as any pair really. So hopefully we'll win this at showdown here. Okay, so he might have folded that pair, but he might not have. He's a shorty. It's a low board, especially on the flop, and I'm not really confident double barreling. And then again, once that turn card comes, it's just kind of a bad spot. Here with 5-8 off, it's basically just an any 2 card raise since the guy limped into my big blind, and that's pretty much the weakest play in poker. And of course, we're going to follow it up on a c-bet. The board is somewhat connected, but he limp called. He can easily have stuff like small pocket pairs, and so he does fold pretty quickly with the bet. Here with the ace-deuce, it's a spot where we have pretty decent equity given our pair, gut shot, backdoor draw. We're betting into 2 people, I guess. It's not really that great, but I think it's okay. I mean, that doesn't have to happen too often, especially given our equity when called. We'll see what you guys think about that one. Might have been slightly on the looser side. But in general, when you flop something like a pair and a draw in a limp pot, we pretty much need to be betting some these hands, because if we check, we could check call profitably most likely, but if check calling is profitable, then betting is almost always more profitable due to fold equity. Okay, yeah, queen 8 suited out of position should be a very standard fold or 3-bet if you choose to. But out of position especially, I'm not going to get too crazy with the 3-betting, simply because, and this is probably something I mentioned last week, but simply because I don't know how often people are folding. And being out of position, you pretty much want to have at least a decent amount of fold equity. Alright, this spot on table 3 kind of sucks because of the shorty, so I'm just going to sit out. I'm going to min-raise this button just because I have Jack 8 suited on the button, and I'm not going to fold my button every hand. And with King Queen again, potential multi-way action. I could 3-bet this hand, but I would actually rather call since I'm suited. I think that, given how bad everyone is, if I flop a nut type hand, I might be able to get a lot of chips. And just a standard c-bet with the jack-8. He called pretty quickly. I'm not going to barrel in this spot, I don't think. Simply because I think, again, I think this guy probably folds most stuff. And again, draw heavy board like this when the fish donks, I really don't see a great reason to try to steal this pot. Alright, so that's a good river. And here with this, we're going to bet for value and everyone checks around to us. If somebody raises here, I'm just going to dump it on the flop. Pretty much, just because I don't think it's a draw ever. Hardly ever. I think it's a worse king, almost never, as well. And so, what does this guy have? Oh, wow, he had 8s. Wow, so he's not giving me any credit at all, which means my two-barrel, or my decision not to two-barrel there was probably good on table 3. I've been relatively aggressive so far, so, we definitely have to think about how our image affects how people play against us. Okay, so he waited till the turn to get his money in bad, and he hits. Well, that's fine. No big deal, obviously. The play there is totally standard. If you lose a pot like this, you gotta just shake it off, move on to the next hand, realize that you got your money in as a significant favorite, and that's poker, So let's see, you're gonna try to find another table that isn't full of shorties. Queen 10 suited under the gun is a little on the loose side, but again, as I mentioned in the last video, I'm going to try to play a little bit, loose in early position just because I think I have a skill advantage. And when he 3-bets me, the first time he's 3-bet me, and that he's short, and that I'm out of position, all just add up to being a pretty easy fold here. Again, hands like this seem pretty. Queen 10 suited, but when he 3-bets you and his range is tight, you're pretty crushed, and being out of position, you're not going to be able to, again, you're not going to be able to ever take down a pot unless you flop something strong. It's even harder to do so out of position as compared to that ace-10 that I folded earlier. And, I should clarify on that ace-10, I would fold ace-10 offsuit to under the gun raise almost always, unless the guy was very, very loose, in which case I might call if if I thought I could exploit him post flop, but somebody who's tight and under the gun, especially ace-10 offsuit, you're not going to get that many good flops. At least with a suited hand, if you want to float with a backdoor draw or something like that, you have a little bit more going for you, although it's still relatively minor. And you see this guy just limp folded his small blind. That's going to happen a ton when you raise there. So that's part of the reason we raise is to build a pot, since we expect to be able to exploit him with position, but also just that he's going to fold pre-flop. He's going to limp call and then check fold the flop very often and things like that too. So. Oh yeah, so let me get that other table up here. It's actually kind of nice with 3, but I think it's probably a little hard for you guys to watch. I know we've had people say that before, so let me load one more. 10-8 suited, I really want to call here. For the sake of instructional purposes, I'm just going to fold because we're out of position, and I don't want you guys to start calling here and going too crazy. This guy's pretty bad, though, so maybe I could call with 10-8 suited. Here I'm going to limp behind. Just because he's kind of... Actually, I should isolate here again because he's pretty tight so far. He's probably just going to check fold a lot. And I timed out with ace-9. I shouldn't have done that, clearly. But anyhow, so here with the double gutter, it's not ideal because there's a flush draw, but we're going to call. And we're just going to keep checking our ace-9. I didn't mean to check this. I probably would have checked it 3 ways, given that everybody, this guy's short, he's going to stack off lighter. They're both really loose. It's mostly just a value raise pre-flop. And again, this guy comes out betting so tiny. I'm getting close to 3-1. I'll call again. Okay, so we river it. I'm going to ship here, basically. It's because he's only got a little bit more than what's in the pot. I don't really expect him to fold anything halfway decent. If he has a diamond draw that he was betting, he's just going to fold anyway. If he had a 9, he would likely just fold anyway, although that's kind of hard to say. Alright, so he did fold. I'm going to try to get away from all these shorties, actually, because, you know, that's not really what I'm here to teach you guys, and honestly, I'm not going to lie, my short stack game is just like, you know, that's kind of how short stacks make money, is by everybody not really knowing the optimal play against shorties and calling them too light and all that kind of stuff, so I don't need to contribute to that fun too much. Although in that hand, you know, I think that it's pretty fine. The only thing that's questionable here is that there's 2 flush draws and my outs might not be live, and he is pretty short, but the bet size and stuff was so small, and he's probably going to stack it when I hit, so I don't mind calling. I know that's not the most rigorous analysis. So here, you know, we have top pair with a flush draw. He comes out donking into us. I'm going to min raise because I have ridiculous equity and I don't really care what he does, and I'm hoping that I can get him to shove with some air type weakness, although there's probably not a whole lot of that in his range even. Oh well, a worse 10. That'll work just fine. I like making silly little plays like that against shorties just to try out, you know, weird lines, see if you can get them to do something stupid, induce some weird action. You know, if we raise bigger, he might just fold 8s. If we just call, and you know, I don't even know if he bets with 8s there, but he definitely could. What else? What was I gonna say? Yeah, you know, if he does have some sort of marginal made hand that he's donking, I don't want a bad card to come off on the turn. Although there would be arguments for calling there. I think if I had like a pair of aces or something like that, I might call. Okay, so this guy's pretty tight so far, but it's only 32 hands, and I'm gonna see a flop. With the ace-10, I want to bet just because I think that a lot of people can have worse hands here, and I want to kind of thin out the field a little bit. Alright, yeah, against this bad player, I was basically just kind of try to I can't talk. Excuse me. Going to try to flop a pair. When he checks, it's interesting. I think I'm going to try to barrel him here. I'm going to bet relatively large. Oh, well. That's fun. And this guy check called this crazy draw heavy board, and then like really, really bad card comes from, you know, the jack, which brings trips to a hand like jack 10 or queen jack. Brings a flush, so I'm just going to muck, and when he check raises, excuse me, nothing I can really do there. Ace-8 suited, the guy's too short and he raised too big, I'm just going to fold, although against the full stack player I would call there. What am I trying to look at? Yeah, so actually it looks like I've been playing relatively tamely on most, well, you know, table 2 here, 26-26. Table 3, I'm going at it, I guess, or table 4, excuse me. Table 1, I've been surprisingly nitty, so, you know, seeing that, excuse me, the rest of the players look relatively fishy. Okay, and now I'm gonna just raise and get it in with jacks. A little bit smaller than pot, so it doesn't look too strong. You know, what was I saying? On table 1, I'm definitely going to try to open up a bit, given that everybody looks pretty rough, or pretty bad, excuse me, so far. Ugh. With 3s, I don't want to just fold because I could stack one of these players in the blinds, so I'm going to limp again. He's got 12 BBs, so it's, you know, definitely don't really, I mean, I guess when he has 12 BBs, we could even justify raising and getting it in based on equity alone, but we're never really doing that well, and so, you know, if he does happen to have like 5s, we're just going to get our money in bad, and I think limping is fine. You know, as I've stated before, I think limping is a pretty good play to sort of mix up your game if you've been very aggressive, and if you're sort of facing short stacks and maybe your hand's not super amazing, but it's something playable, given that, you know, if you have to put in one big blind and the guy's got, you know, 30 or 40 big blinds, you're still getting really good implied odds on your money. So, you know, limping behind is definitely a play that I make from time to time, and I would advocate that you do so as well. You know, just think about stack size, think about your implied odds, and realize that, especially against some of these shorter guys that are really loose passive, a lot of the profit from isolating a hand like pocket 3s doesn't just come from, you know, building a pot to flop a set, but it also comes from fold equity, either pre-flop or post-flop. And so if you don't have that fold equity, it's totally fine to limp in. Again, that's more if somebody's shorter though, because the whole 100 big blind stack, you want to basically create your own odds more or less. And here with threes, the guy's kind of short, and so we've talked in some other videos that you might have seen about, being cautious with these small pairs when you might not have the implied odds, but given how short he is, I almost always think I have implied odds here with threes, especially if we get a multi-way pot. Just because he's probably really bad is my main rationale. Again, something that we talk about in other videos, pretty good tell on somebody if they're sitting with half stack, they're bad. If you're table selecting and you see a table full of guys with like 70 BBs, you should sit down as fast as possible, pretty much. So I don't know what's going on here on table 1 as far as my supreme level of nittiness. With pocket threes there, no reason to continue out of position 3 ways, even though it's pretty much the best flop we could hope for, except for a set. Well, really it's not, because, a 6 could come and make our hand dead, too. I guess the best flop would be like 6 deuce deuce or something, but being out of position, we're rarely going to be able to take that hand to showdown because of our opponents behind us betting. Oh wow, and that guy limp called with deuce 4 suited. Definitely worth noting. I'm probably not going to make too many notes this video, just because, again, I want to focus on the commentary, and I felt myself getting a little bit flustered last week. Alright, so with ace-10 out of position here, we're going to raise for sure for value pretty much. Back to what I was saying about table 1. You guys are going to have to, come in the thread after the video's done and yell at me or something if I've just been not paying attention or something like that, because I'm really not sure why I'm so tight. But, that said, sometimes it happens just due to the hands you've been dealt and due to the, I'm going to bet here. I'm going to bet a little bit bigger. Basically expect a lot of fold equity on this flop, given that it's so dry. That's a good turn card for me. I expect that to give me the best hand the vast majority of the time, so I'm just going to bet again. And he quick calls. So normally I would bet here, but he quick called, which makes me think that he might have had a draw, which makes me want to try to check to induce to him right now, which I don't normally do at the micros. Okay, snap call. Booyah! So, there's a really, really fun hand that I'm really happy came up, because I totally own that guy's soul. But, sorry, I get excited sometimes. But, basically, he made the quick call, I believe, on the turn. He insta-called, which is almost always a draw. And so normally I would value bet the river. But, again, I saw that timing tell, and, here, actually, I'm going to bet kind of weakly again to try to induce some action. But yeah, sorry, I saw the timing tell, and I went for it, and he snap shoved and snap called, and that's like a perfect example of a timing tell working out just in your favor. So yeah, I would say that those sort of tells are really not going to be too prevalent at micros. Here, pocket threes, I'm just going to fold given the shorties behind. I don't really want to open limp there. I guess I could. Open limping might be more plus EV, just because I don't think the button's going to really, exploit that too much, but again, just going to play relatively tightly compared to last week at least. So yeah, let me get another table up again. And you can kind of see actually in that hand, so here with Jack 10, I'm going to check to induce bluffs again. If I bet, I don't really expect to get called by that many worse hands. If I check, this guy could definitely, he's got a 47 aggression factor so far, and his aggression on later streets is relatively high. So if he keeps betting, reasonable sizes, I'm going to try to calm down here. He insta check back on the turn, so I don't think he's going to try to bluff the river. And therefore, I think that I should go for value, but it's pretty thin just because I don't think he has much. So yeah, he had the check fold hit, I guess, on the turn. um, but I probably did get an extra bet out of him in that spot that I wouldn't have otherwise. So I tried to get on the table that I'm already on here. That's always frustrating. And the same thing just happened again. So it looks like I'm on pretty good tables because all the tables that I'm trying to get on are the tables I'm already on because I'm just not paying attention, I guess. So let's take a look. Everybody's got a decent stack here, so definitely going to sit down. So this table here, Falcon, I looked at it and actually had a less than 10 big blind average pot. But the VPIP was, and I lost it now because it's gone off the lobby, which is on my other screen. But you know, given that it's a sort of a low average pot and a relatively high VPIP, I think I talked about this last time, but I think that means typically you have loose passive players that are not betting and raising often, giving you pretty profitable spots to sit. So here with 2 overs and a gut shot, I'm going to bet. It's not a great board to bet into 2 people, but I think I have enough equity given my my outs win behind. I'm not going to barrel here just because it's 3 ways. The ace could help someone, especially 3 ways. There's a little more chance probably that somebody has like ace 8 or ace 9, or not just that, but especially the ace x of diamonds. So I'm just going to check and hope to hit an offsuit jack on the turn, or river, excuse me. Well, it's checking through. I'm kind of wondering if I could take this down with a bet based on the passive turn play, but I kind of doubt it. Well, maybe so. That guy, oh, my hand was good. Alright, well sometimes that happens too, ladies and gentlemen, where you'll bet your queen high into 3 people and get, or 2 people, get 2 colors and have it be good, where they both have draws. That's very rare, but I guess my intuition was right that I could have bet and taken the pot down, but it would have been more or less pointless. One thing that I think you know, developing players struggle with is making a play and then not knowing if it was the correct play. You know, you start running bad and you start running into spots where guys are basically always at the top of their range. And, you know, I don't really have a super specific set of guidelines for you other than to just try to be really, really critical of your own play and objective and realize that, you know, if some fish called your 3-bet, you know, with 60 BBs and hits a set on you, he's not making a good play, you know, and don't let that get to your head if it keeps happening. It's probably just, you know, he keeps on, you know, sucking out and getting lucky on you. And, you know, you often see fish with, like, huge stacks because it, you know, and again, this is just anecdotal observation, but it seems like they always tend to either get stacked quickly or run up a giant stack from getting super lucky. Keep in mind, you know, if the fish didn't get lucky and win sometimes, they wouldn't play, and we wouldn't be able to take their money. So, you know, if they make a really bad play and you lose the hand, that's awesome because they're making really bad plays, and you have to think about the long run. So, you know, I don't even remember exactly what it was, but I had a hand at the beginning of the lesson that I lost. Oh, that flush draw hand. The guy had ace deuce, and he check called with bottom pair and a flush draw, and he shipped the turn, and I snapped, and he sucked out, and, you know, he didn't really make a great play there, but I got my money in as a huge favorite. And so, you know, looking at things like PokerStove to help you analyze whether your play was correct against your opponent's range is definitely going to be helpful. Something that I think that guys at these stakes don't really do too much is play around with Stove and really try to figure out, you know, if this guy has a range of super, you know, crappy hands, and I run into a strong hand, you know, did he have enough of the bad hands for my equity to be, you know, positive here? And likewise, if you run into a spot where your opponent has a huge hand, go into PokerStove, put in your hand versus their range of made hands that are better than yours. And then just try experimenting with adding in combos of other hands. And this is really sort of how you learn how to get good at poker, is by playing around with this and really understanding how ranges and equity work. I mean, the CTS book is called Let There Be Range, and there's a good reason for that. I don't have the book, but just saying, like, ranges are very important, and realizing how ranges interact with the board texture as well. King 10, this guy raised really huge, and I don't really know anything about him. I'm just going to fold, unfortunately. I kind of want to barrel the queen 5 board. This is kind of a questionable spot. I just kind of want to see if it works. So, don't think that this is super plus EV or anything like that. I mainly just think that if he has something like 8s, I might be able to get him to, or, really weaker, like a crappy, a crappy pair like 4s or 6s or something. I might be able to get him to fold. If he had a draw again, I might have been able to get some value. But he check raises, so I think he basically has a queen there every single time. So, I can make a note on him, check call. And again, that was a spot I don't really advocate barreling unless you have a good read on somebody. I was just kind of trying it out to see if it would work. So, again, this is sort of one of those do as I say, not as I do kind of moments. Gosh, again, being short stacked against this guy, there's really not much I can do. I probably should just get off this table 3. It's really, really affecting the dynamic quite a bit. Because I would have called there if he was a decent stack player. Of course, he's the one that raised too, but still. But anyway, back to this hand with the queen 5 board. I think a paired board like that is, somebody's range is likely to be pretty weak when they call unless they have a queen, and he could have ace high, he could have a draw. So I went for the barrel. It didn't work out, but you never know if it's going to work until you try. And so anyhow, gonna have to fold 8s to the squeeze here. Unfortunately, we're a little bit deep, but the re-raise size is kind of large. This guy is short stacked, and he could overshove if I just flatted, and that puts me in a gross spot. I do expect this guy's range to be pretty strong, but again, if Ace King is in his range, it's kind of hard for me to call there. Wow, and that guy obviously had air, but if Ace King is in his range, it's kind of hard for me to call because a lot of the time I flop a set, I'm gonna have to get away. He's not really loose enough that I'm happy floating him post flop. So again, I'm kind of just in a spot where I'm playing fit or fold, and I don't think I have the odds against his range. But back to what I was saying about PokerStove, I totally got sidetracked there, and I think it's kind of important. One of my students, I went over a type of spot like this with them in PokerStove, and maybe I should even make a video or something about how to, play around with PokerStove, to get a bit more out of the program. But you basically, in a spot where it's very, your opponent has a very narrow value range, and you stack off with an overpair or something like that, and you think, well, did I make a good play or not? Like, say the board is like 3, 7, 10 against a really aggressive player, and you stack off to him, and he has a set. Well, all you need to do is go in there and put in his range of made hands. So give him 3s, 7s, 10s, and just start adding a couple of hands here and there to see how many combos of bluffs does he actually have for you to get it in profitably. And very, very, very often you'll see that it's like not even close with some of these spots because they just simply, again, this is more against aggressive players, but they simply, just there's so few combos of sets, say, on like a 10-7-3 board. There's only 9 combos of sets, and so typically you only really, again, you should play around with it and see for yourself, but you don't need to get a whole lot of action. Okay, this guy's been really nitty. I kind of want to call again, but this guy's so short that it just totally screws up the dynamic. And he has king queen, so it looks like I actually made a good fold in hindsight because his range isn't nearly as tight as I expected it to be if he's 3-betting with king queen in a spot like that. So. Oh, now here comes the timing out. Sorry about that. Again, I'm still super tight on this table. Been kind of just trying to commentate and play, so forgive me for not really understanding what's been going on. I guess I've just been folding. We can go back and kind of look. see my whole cards. Have I even had a, I played those eights that I had to fold, or no, excuse me, I took down the pot, excuse me. Yeah, really just not getting dealt anything but junk, it looks like. Had a couple little hands, but again, no big pairs or anything like that. No ace king, ace queen, so sometimes you just end up playing nitty on a table. And as a result, and I would say in 10NL it doesn't matter really too much, but as a result, if you're playing real nitty, people might tend to give you a bit of credit in spots that they wouldn't otherwise, so you might be able to get away with, barreling ace high board occasionally or something like that against somebody who's thinking, which again, not something I would do too often, but yeah. So I think the theme today is just I'm going to double barrel people as often as I can and see if it works. And let you guys really just sort of see for yourself. I mean, a paired board like this is, he should be calling with tons of junk. He insta checks behind, checks it to me. Damn it, I meant to fold that. Sorry. Yeah, I meant to fold the queen eight up here. I suspect he's going to have something like, fives or eights a lot here, but I could have the best hand. Jacks. Wow, so that's even stronger than I anticipated. Oh boy, everybody never fails to surprise me in these games, which is why I like to kind of, just get in there and try some weird stuff that you guys might not be doing and see if it works, and then give you my thoughts on it. Unconventional wisdom for the micros, if you will. So this guy doesn't 3-bet jacks pre-flop versus me. Good to know. I'm also going to make a note on the line that he took post-flop, just because sometimes guys will flat call pre-flop with these pairs. And so it's really good to know if, you're facing a relatively passive guy who comes alive post-flop. It's really good to know if he can have stuff like aces or kings or queens in his range, because then it makes it a little easier for you to justify getting it in some spots where, fish are playing really passively and you have stuff like marginal two-pair, and you're not really sure, if you can profitably get it in or not. So at this point with jacks, I'm just going to ship it in here pre-flop against this guy. He's been making these big opens fairly often. Alright, so he has king, queen. And diamond one time? 10? Alright, well, again, whatever. What can I do there? So just a c-bet here on the king high board. It's a little drawy, but king high board I should get plenty of fold equity. That's not a great card to barrel. My barrels haven't been working out too much, so we'll just check back here. Maybe we can hit a pair and take down the pot or something against his crap. And again, at this point, especially once I check the turn and show a bit of weakness, I don't think I'm going to get him off anything. And if he has a draw, I might win. So, oh, wow, bottom pair. Alright, so, we're not really expecting anybody to, or excuse me, it's not that we're not expecting people to fold pairs on that board, it's that we don't need them to fold pairs on that board for c-betting to be profitable, given how much air he should have, so no big deal. Here with 10-8, I think it's a good limp spot. I've been so tight up here, I just want to get in some hands. I didn't see if he posted or if he checked. Or, I guess that's the same thing. If he posted or if he limped. If he posted, and I had a stronger hand, I guess I would raise, something with a bit more high card potential. Simply because if he posts and then he checks, it's interesting, is instead of his range sort of being like any 2, it's actually worse than any 2 because he would have raised all his good hands, theoretically at least. So yeah. Oh man, and I really suspect that against some of these guys that are very tight, it might be profitable to set mine, but I would have to run through the math. So if anybody wants to do that as an exercise, that would be awesome. I feel like there might be some good, you won't hear me say this too often these days, unfortunately, which no disrespect meant to 2+2, the company, but just the level of posters has kind of gone downhill. But, okay, sorry, I have to interrupt that thought. Basically here, this guy, PTK, should never have a good hand, and neither should the other guy, so I'm going to 3-bet. I'm going to 3-bet relatively small because if he does ship it over top of this, or excuse me, 4-bet, if he does ship it over top of this 4-bet, I'm kind of screwed. I think this guy is super loose and he can have a very wide range of hands that I'm ahead of. And now we're somewhat in a gross spot, but I'm just going to bet and hope that he folds and I can maybe take down this side pot. If I get called, I have equity. Wow, it's 8 high. I definitely have equity against 8 high. So I guess he had a gut shot, but still, so you can kind of see what I'm going for there. You know, people are going to have air plenty on a flop like this if he's playing super loose like this guy. I'm definitely not worried at all about the shorty, so. Oh boy. Not entirely sure what to do here, to be quite honest. But I have a super pretty hand. I'm way out of position. We can debate this one in the forums, whether calling preflop is good here or not. But this guy seems relatively loose. So far, you know, he's squeezed in late position. Now he's checking the flop. I expect my hand to be good here, overwhelmingly. As played, at least. So I'm just going to bet 2 for value and hope that I can get it in. If this Oliver Sand guy then tries to get it in with me after checking the flop, that's going to be a little bit gross, but that's okay. And here I'm going to bet, and, you know, again, this is one of those spots where I wouldn't not be that surprised to see a better hand than mine. That slow played occasionally, but the vast majority of the time, my queen here is going to be good. You know, if he has ace queen, that's probably about all I'm losing to there. Wow, and he called down with 9s. So it turns out that I can make all kinds of loose pre-flop calls because everybody's so bad post-flop. So what do you know? This might not be a bad spot to bet if it wasn't 4-way on table 1 with my gutter. I do have a gutter, right? Yeah. so, you know, but given, you know, 4-way pot, I'm just going to check and hope to see a turn. And queens, I'm just clearly getting it in on the flop against this guy. Top pair, no good, sir. Alright guys, well, we're approaching 50 minutes. I think that, you know, we're going to give it another orbit or two and then wrap it up. I feel like this video, I wasn't quite on my my A+ video making game. Not quite as, you know, as good as the last one. You know, but I always think that. So let me know what you guys think, because that's all I really care about, clearly, is whether you guys like the video or not. Again, you know, this is our, or excuse me, this is your site. We just work here. Almost said that backwards. Totally screwed up my point. Anyhow. Again, keep in mind, some of the spots that I showed you guys before, I was kind of testing out some double barrels. I haven't played, you know, the 10NL game too much, but I had, you guys requested that we do another one, so instead of the 25NL I was going to jump back down here for a bit. And, you know, some of those double barrel spots are questionable, so I have had some success with them, but you know, it definitely requires knowing your villain. Definitely requires paying attention, seeing how often guys are peeling the flop then folding the turn. You know, you can use stats. If you have double barrel stats on your HUD, I would say they're not super valuable unless you have a great sample size, but somebody actually mentioned in the last video, you know, that they seem to think that my HUD was cluttered, and then someone, you know, so sorry about that, but I like my HUD, and unless a lot of other people complain, I'm going to probably keep it this way. And here I think that, you know, he's going to have to fold a lot of unspaded hands, so to speak. And I haven't been taking too many of these stabs, so it's probably not going to work the way the video's been going every time I try to do something kind of light. But, you know, monotone flop is actually interesting. Against somebody with a wide range, they're actually less likely to have hit a monotone flop than a rainbow board, which we can all thank Josh, aka TubaSteve, for Professor Plotkin, for figuring that out for us. So thanks, Josh. That's very awesome to know. Oh, good. And so for the last hand, maybe I'll get to stack someone. Or one of the last hands, excuse me. You know, if he checks back, he probably just has total air, but when he bets, you know, definitely expect him to have a hand. Now I'm trying to figure out the best way to extract value. I think it's going to be to just make a relatively normal size raise. I don't really think that there's a whole ton I can do here to, you know, I've got a little bit of history with this guy, so I think he's probably going to stack off light-ish against me anyhow. Three-way pot, I don't want to just call and let somebody else see. Nice. I don't want to call and let somebody else, you know, this guy see a really, really, really cheap plus EV turn for him. So, anyway, this guy has aces, and we're going to get it in and win, probably, so. Wow, top pair! So, you can kind of see the power of playing loose and aggressive. I mean, this guy's a nit over 51 hands. You know, I donked into him in one spot. I guess I didn't personally do that much to get to him, but, you know, we look here. I'm playing 36-30 on this table, and I guess he just assumed that I had to be able to have a lot of, you know, light hands there in order to get it in, and he stacked off with top pair no kicker, which in reality against me is a really, really, really bad stack off, because I'm never going to show up there with a worse hand, ever. Ever, ever, ever. But I've been playing so loose and so crazy that he thinks I'm just some fish donking around. You know, he's not paying attention to what I actually show up with. And I've been able to take down enough pots that he just probably thought that I was, again, you know, showing up with a lot of stuff there. Now, he also could just be tilted from other reasons, too, and he just finally got a top pair, well, not even top kicker, but you know what I mean, top pair type of hand, and decided to go with it. And he left right away, so again, you know, he very easily could have been tilting or something. So, when I get two calls on a king 10-10 board in a limp pot, I'm actually not that optimistic about my hand being good, in the sense that it's probably still good, but if I get raised, I think I have a really easy fold. I'm definitely going to keep betting to get value from kings and, you know, maybe king or queen jack or ace high or something. And I suspect that if they both folded that neither of them even had a king. But it's a spot where, you know, you have to sort of have, you know, your plan, and I don't have a lot of time to get into talking about, you know, planning hands out, because we're about to wrap up the video, but something that I, again, have been sort of pointing out to my students recently, or guys on the forums who are not really sure whether or not they can stack off against certain players and stuff, is that, you know, if you're not sure if you can stack off against somebody with a hand like top pair, that probably means you can't, because if you were able to, you would have, let me rephrase that, if you have to ask yourself the question, can I stack off with top pair against this guy, it's probably because they haven't actually been aggressive for enough for you to really be sure, right? Which means you should probably err on the side of caution. You know, for me personally, you know, when I'm playing and I see some guy who is kind of spewing around all over the place, you know, I know ahead of time that that player I'm going to stack off with top pair weak kicker, and then some other guy who's a fish who's playing kind of passively, I might not know, and I might know that I'm going to be betting for value against him with top pair, and I might be a little unsure how I'm going to respond to a raise. But when you're unsure, we should probably err on the side of caution, because people tend to overwhelmingly play way too loose and way too passively at these stakes. Alright, so let's go ahead and sit out, make the queens our last hand here. I'm going to raise a little bigger than normal because I have queens and this guy's super loose. Both of them are relatively loose, I guess. And we're doing a bit of running good here. So we flop a set. On a board like this, I kind of want to just bet big for value, try to get as much money in there as possible. He's not going to fold a hand like Jack 10 probably for any amount, so might as well get as much as we can from it. And here, a lot of people might check with bottom pair. Again, this is a fallacy I think a lot of people have, is automatically if you have a low pair you can check for showdown value, but I don't think that, you know, my pair threes is really going to hold up that well, given another diamond could come off. Any number of overcards, of course, could come off. I kind of want to barrel here, again, just because I don't think, well, basically if I barrel here, I'm trying to get him to fold a 9 or fold a pair. He's not ever going to really, you know, at least I wouldn't expect him to fold a pair with a diamond. Probably not going to fold a 9 either. So, again, you know, my pie in the sky barreling, you know, plan here sounds great, but it's probably not actually going to work. So, went ahead and checked back. So this is a flop where, you know, against a loose player, I think we should sometimes check back, given that we don't have a lot of fold equity. With a hand like Ace-10, though, again, I think that against the types of hands he can call me with, even if I don't have the best hand, I still have relatively good equity, and I still could consider barreling a king or a queen, which, you know, it hasn't really been working out too well for me this session, but for the most part, you know, a board like this, you know, bet once, king comes in the turn, people are going to check fold there a ton. You know, this particular player never really seems to want to fold anything. And again, we have we can see from the pop-up here, we have a pretty small sample on his turn, fold to c-bet on the turn, so. And when he donks into us on that board, again, you know, when fish donk on these sort of draw-heavy boards, it's really not a great idea to try to raise them off a hand, I don't think, simply because they're probably, you know, not going to fold, given that there's so many draws. They often have hands with a lot of outs. Whereas if they bet out on like a 10-4-7 rainbow board or something, or some even drier, maybe like Queen 7-4 rainbow, then they're way more likely to just be betting with air and trying to take the pot down, hoping that you have ace king or, you know, something like that. Alright, well, I forgot to uncheck the auto post with the 7 deuce suited here, but I'm just going to sit out and, well, I guess we'll see if I flop something good first. So I got bottom pair, 3 ways. I'm not going to bet this. Heads up, I might bet it to just try to take the pot away. Alrighty. And so before we wrap it up, I just wanted to take a quick minute to let you guys look at my overall stats for today's session. You know, basically, here's my Hold'em manager. I played much more conservatively than the last video, although I wasn't really trying to. You know, I played 24-19, or, well, 23-19, I guess. I rarely 3-bet anyone today. Again, kind of going counter to what I said I was going to try to do. But I think this is actually really interesting because it just kind of shows how you don't have to play a certain style, and you don't have to, you know, what am I trying to say? You don't have to, you know, try to copy people that you see on videos and emulate things. You just have to objectively think about each situation that comes up and react to it appropriately. So in the last video, I believe I had guys that were folding the 3-bets, or maybe I even had guys, or, you know, again, I'm sorry, I actually, full disclosure, I actually recorded that video quite some time ago in preparation for this season, but we just never really got to give me my season until this semester due to, you know, various reasons. But the moral of the story is, you know, I'm not coming in here trying to make things happen. I'm just like reacting more or less and adjusting to what's going on around me. And so I didn't 3-bet very much, you know, because I really didn't get very many situations where I could 3-bet a hand light like king queen for value, you know what I mean? And if you guys see some spots that I missed, then by all means point them out to me. That's a really great exercise on your part, is to go back through these videos and ignore the content that I'm talking about, but just, you know, hell, put me on mute and watch back the video and see what you think without my explanation, and see if you can try to figure it out. That's something that Wilt on Tilt recommends doing in his very first, I believe, episode of High School, is the whole pause and predict method. And of course, I'm telling you guys to do this at the end of the video when it, I guess, is somewhat of a moot point, but for the future, you know, keep that in mind. So anyhow, let's take another quick look and just see what else. I'm folding to most of my 3 bets. Again, this is, top 3 leaks at the micros are 1, not value betting enough. 2, not folding enough on the turn or river when raised, and sometimes the flop, depending on the situation. 3, not folding to enough 3 bets. Definitely the 3 biggest leaks that I've encountered throughout my, couple years of coaching and my, 50 plus students if you count the Wacom course or something like that. It's well, if you count the Wacom course, it's probably damn near close to 60 or 70. But anyhow, the vast majority of them, those are their 3 biggest leaks. What else? 1 win soft flop is usually pretty low. This is a measure of how hard you're willing to fight for pots. If your 1 win soft flop is below 40, you play way too fit or fold post flop. Went to what's this? Yeah, went to showdown. My win to showdown here is actually very high. It should be in the mid-20s, basically. Depending on how many pots you pick up post-flop through, barrels or thin value betting even, and furthermore how good your hand reading is as far as knowing when to stack off light and when not to. This could be anywhere in the range from, 22. Mine tends towards 22. When I play 50-cent dollar or 1-2, which is lower than most people's, and I'm really not sure why. So if anybody has any insight, that'd be awesome. But I think most people tend to be more like 23 to 25-ish, and some really, really good guys can get it up like 27, 28. Again, this is just my experience, and these numbers might not be exact, so if you disagree with my numbers, by all means, let us know what your experience is there. Some of you guys might have looked at some data mines or something where you have a better idea. So anyhow, if this is 28 or higher, or around 28, again, don't just say, if you're 27 and a half, don't be like, TubaSteve said 28, so I'm good. Definitely still check it out and see what's going on. See if you're maybe stacking off light in a certain spot where your opponent only is showing up with strong hands. Put a filter on. We can do some pretty sweet filters in Hold'em Manager. I'll just give you one quick example of a filter, and then finish up the rests, because I wasn't going to do this originally, but I think that it's really useful. So the big filter that everybody should really look at, and I'm not going to go through my whole database, it's going to take forever, but basically the turn, let's see, we want to look for spots where we turn, bet, call. Now the problem here is you can't select more than one of these at a time. Okay, you can only select turn, bet, call equals true, turn, bet, raise equals true. I think in Poker Tracker 3, you might actually be able to do ORs for your Boolean, if you're familiar with, that word, Boolean being the operator. Whether it's and, such as, these two things being at the same time, or an or. Hold'em Manager only lets you do and. So anyway, don't put both these on and wonder why you're not getting any hands, because I used to do that, and I'll tell you, it's kind of embarrassing, especially in the middle of a coaching session, until you figure it out. So anyhow, look at these 2 types of filters, basically, or even, really something that might be easier is just like look for spots where you were all in by the turn, but that, I guess that doesn't really take into consideration spots where like somebody check calls you and then check raises the turn and there's still some stack behind after you call. So that, I guess that wouldn't show that. So yeah, definitely look at like the bet call turn, the raise call on the turn, the same thing on the river, especially, river raises and bets are way more likely to be nut hands than turn even, so really, I can't say it often enough. Start folding when you get raised on the turn in the river. It'll save you so much money. So much money. So anyway, I'm going over my hour here. You guys are probably tired of hearing me voice. I can't even talk anymore. But let's look at the, keep it going with the 1 money at showdown. It's 52.4 here. Anything around 50% is okay. Although interestingly enough, if your 1 money at showdown is too high, it's probably because you're not value betting enough, because you're checking the best hand down too often. So keep that in mind. And then likewise, if your 1 money when at showdown is below 50, it's okay, because we have to realize that given the fact that we always have pot odds to call on the river, and the pot odds are almost never worse than 2 to 1, and obviously there's like future betting, and this isn't exactly correct, so don't get too nitty on me, but basically if there's dead money in the pot, we don't have to win over 50% of our showdowns. right? So it's not like this magic number where if you're not winning 50% of them, you're a losing player. I think you could probably find plenty of guys that are big winners that understand that when they call a river bet, it only needs to be, profitable, or excuse me, they only need to have the best hand, X amount based on the odds. Uh, right? Okay. So yeah, moving on again. Flop and turn C bet. These numbers are covered somewhat in other videos, but basically, 82% I think is kind of high long term. It should be around 65 to 70%, or excuse me, 65 to 75, sort of depending on how you play and what games you're playing in. What the other players are up to, as far as how bad are they, how good are they, how often do they actually fold the C bets, so on and so forth. So these are pretty variable, especially the turn, because the turn C bet is really dependent on how often you bet flops and sort of your overall strategy. This is definitely high. I would say anything above 40 is kind of high, but again, somebody with a flop C bet of 70 and a turn C bet of 40 is not betting the turn with as strong of a range as somebody with a flop C bet of like 60 and a turn C bet of 40. So keep in mind that you kind of multiply these two percentages together to sort of figure out. And again, don't use these stats and then try to plug them into PokerStove. That's not a useful way of thinking about things. We should think about what people are actually doing with certain lines, and realize that, to sort of figure out the total number of hands, kind of, roughly, that he's betting the turn with, you would multiply them together. So, just a little food for thought. Guys that bet less flops should bet more turns because their range should be stronger when they get to the turn. Fold flop versus C-bet was low today. Usually that should be around 55, 60 if I remember correctly, but it's not a stat that I really think about too much in terms of, how I play, because again, what's way more important than that stat is how I'm implementing my floats and my peels and things like that. But I think for me it's usually around like 55, and you can kind of see, against some guys that are folding like 75% C-bets, they're probably just playing way too fit or fold and not taking down enough pots, It's probably very easy to hand read them too. So, that's part of the benefit of floating. It makes you tough as hell to hand read. Anyway, aggression factors I don't care about because I think they're antiquated and useless. If you don't understand why, maybe I'll explain later. But basically, they don't actually tell us useful information compared to what we can get from the aggression percentages. Since the flop, turn, and river aggression don't tell us how often somebody folds, it's relatively useless to me, personally. I don't know. If you disagree, I would love to hear explanations, but I think I've managed to convert everybody away that I've talked to, so good luck. Anyhow, small blind and big blind fold to steal should be in the 80s, probably. I think I probably played a little tight in my big blind. You should generally be loose in the big blind, but again, over 300 hands, it's hard to say if I actually was playing too tight without going back and looking through all my hands. And I already admit that I probably played a little tighter than I should have, just because I folded in some spots because I was talking about hands and I wanted to spend a little bit more time on the commentary. Flop, turn, and river aggression factors. I think the best way for you guys to understand these would really just be to go through your database. Look at this. Where is it? I'm not gonna click on it because it takes forever to load. But if you look at this players tab or the versus, actually I think it's the players tab up here, you can kind of see summaries of everybody's stats kind of next to each other. At least it's somewhere in there. Again, it's gonna freeze my whole hold'em manager and take like 3 or 4 minutes probably, so I'm not gonna click it now. But check that out and see how people play. Compare everyone at your stakes and really figure out what the averages are. And in fact, hold'em manager will calculate all that for you, I believe, if you go to the like advanced, player thing. Gosh, where is it? I suspect some people know what I'm talking about when I say that, but this is it, I think. Oh no, that's not. That's just the notes. Anyway, sorry. I didn't have that prepared ahead of time. But there's a window in here that will let you actually kind of look at everybody's hands, and it'll tell you what it thinks their leaks are based on the averages in your database. And so it's kind of ironic. Like, if you're playing well, it'll probably tell you have a bunch of leaks just because you're playing so much differently than everyone else. But and also, I haven't looked at this stuff at all yet, but Hold'em Manager has the awesome leak buster thing that I haven't looked at personally, but people tell me is useful. So a lot of resources that you guys that are still playing 10 and out can use, without even having to pay for coaching or anything like that. So Definitely take advantage of them, and definitely try to take advantage of your fellow DeucesCracked members, because I know all my students are down to sweat 10NL players, you know, just about all of them, So if you want a reference, and I imagine now my PM box is going to get flooded, but if you want a reference, you know, try to, I don't know, I suggest PMing me, and maybe I can hook you up with somebody, I don't know. Or, some of my guys I'm sure will be posting in my thread, and maybe they'll chime in and take some volunteers. Hint, hint, students that are watching this. So anyhow, thank you all very much for checking out this video. Oh, one more thing I wanted to look at real quick is just showdown winnings a little bit, just to show that you definitely can play micro stakes without having a red line that goes straight into the ground. Okay, so just a bit of a misconception that people tend to have, and once I get a lot more hands in, I'll show you guys a large sample size. I figured I'll just go ahead and do today's, since somebody requested they want to see my stats. Just give a brief review, and then as we progress, we'll look at some larger samples. Alright guys, well thank you again very much. It's probably the second or third time I've said that, but for DeucesCracked.com, this is TubaSteve with episode 2 of Road to Robusto No Limit Edition, and we'll see you next week with some 25NL action.